Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Alexander Hook, Principal Deputy Chief Monitor of the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission in Ukraine with weekly updates from the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Last week was in many ways the worst we have seen so far this year. In total, we recorded almost 7,700 ceasefire violations. On some days, the level of violence was similar of a phase of the conflict we had fought had been left in the past. On Wednesday night, early Thursday morning in Svetlodarsk, the SMM heard almost 500 explosions and about 860 shots and bursts of heavy machine gun and small arms fire. Of particular concern was the situation in Chorlivka, where for a long time a relative calm had prevailed. On Thursday night, early Friday morning, that calm was nowhere to be seen. Our monitoring officers at the SMM for patrol base in Chorlivka heard about 140 explosions, mostly artillery and tank fire, plus bursts and shots of anti-aircraft gun, heavy machine gun and small arms fire. Also worrying was the use of multiple launch rocket systems. On Wednesday evening, on the 16th of May, the SMM static camera at the Donetsk filtration station recorded over 20 Grad rockets impacting west of the facility in a government-controlled area. Artillery, especially multiple launch rocket system, is a wide-range area weapon. It does not discriminate between combatant and civilian. Used in urban areas, it is murderous and reckless. Last week, between 14th and 20th May, we have confirmed that 2 civilians, including a 13-year-old boy in Troitsk in Luhansk region, were killed and another 3 were injured. We have many more cases pending, including involving the death of 4 civilians and of the injury of 6. Our monitoring officers are following up to establish the facts. These facts will be made available in our public daily reports on our website in English, Ukrainian and Russian languages. With the mounting fatalities and the tit-for-tat retaliatory artillery strikes, there was last week a sense that the spiral of violence was sucking in all senses and undermining any willingness or ability to put a stop to the madness. What sense, what logic is there in firing artillery rounds on Svetlodarsk, impacting less than 300 meters from civilian SMM monitoring officers and damaging a school with hundreds of children inside at the time? Here on this map, you can see how close the impacts were, just 15 meters from the school. What logic is there firing Grad rockets into an area close to civilian infrastructure? What logic is there in firing artillery rounds on defenseless, innocent Ukrainian citizens in Chorlivka? There is no logic. There is just perpetual violence motion, both sides claiming to respond, neither side knowing who started. An unending, pointless cycle of violence. Dear friends, I traveled to Donetsk region on Thursday. Over 3 days on the ground, I got a small taste of what my colleagues based there have been witnessing and experiencing for a very long time now. A violent, pointless standoff with civilians caught in the middle. But we also saw glimmers of hope. For the first time in a long time, I met people in positions of power making sense. For the first time, I saw a willingness to restore normality or at least to take a first step towards it. I met people with concrete proposals to reduce tension, to end the violence, people, finally it seems, who understand that things cannot go on as they are. I was in particular heartened by the discussions we had on the Donetsk filtration station. As you know, there has been a concentration of violence in the DFS area. Hundreds of thousands of people on both sides of the contact line depend on it. And yet both sides seem determined to destroy the plant. Through shelling and small arms fire, sometimes directly targeting, they threatened the lives of the workers there. In one instance, they fired on them, injuring 5, one critically. They also threatened the civilian SMM monitoring officers who since late April have been at the plant on a daily basis, ensuring the workers get access so they can do their job. It has been and remains a bizarre, even grotesque situation. But finally, in Donetsk region last week, I found what seems like a recognition of this. Finally, some people in position of powers on both sides of the contact line, it seems, are waking up to the reality. On the ground, there is a growing realization that violence only begets violence. That there are no winners in continuing violence. That 0 civilian casualties is the only objective worth fighting for. That only through dialogue can this conflict be resolved. From my conversations, it seems there is now a realization that there must be disengagement from the wider DFS area if the fighting is to stop, if the DFS is to remain operational. With the positions on both sides currently as close as 200 to 300 meters from the DFS has been at the center of the fighting. Here, in this heat map, showing the intensity of the violence in the wider DFS area over the first 3 weeks of May this year, you can clearly see that the majority of ceasefire violations had been occurring in and immediately around the facility. You can see that there must be pullback, that tanks, mortars and artillery must be removed to a distance which will take the DFS out of range and remove it from danger, as agreed in Minsk. There is, I believe, finally a realization that the risk to the workers and the civilian monitoring officers there is unacceptably high. There is a realization that this is unacceptable and unsustainable. That the presence of the workers and the monitoring officers can no longer be guaranteed. Indeed, there is now an acceptance that the Donetsk filtration station can no longer operate, that over 300,000 people on both sides of the contact line will be without drinking water if these weapons are not removed. This must happen now. If it does not, it is only a matter of time before the facility is closed. This, I believe, the sides understand, and if they do not, they should take responsibility for the consequences. Dear friends, the road to peace is long and difficult. We have had false starts before, hopes raised, only to be dashed. There are many people unwilling or unable to take the first tentative steps towards resolution. There are many spoilers, many people with a vested interest in continuing violence. What is senseless for everyone else makes sense for them. there are always those who will profit from other people's suffering. And there are those too scared to do the right thing, afraid of losing power, prestige, and position. But I believe there are now people willing to take the first step. I hope that sense will prevail. I hope that the positive messages I received last week, that the positive attitude and constructive approach can finally ensure that the Donetsk filtration station remains operational. It's a first step, a sensible step. I hope it is taken, and I remind those who have committed to taking it that 300,000 men, women and children are depending on you. I remind them that the people on both sides of the contact line will be without drinking water if they do not take this step. And I remind them that the consequences, ranging from humanitarian to ecological disaster, will be on their heads. If this step is taken, more can follow, more steps along what I hope will be the road to peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hook. Now it's time for questions. Dear colleagues, if you have questions, you're welcome. If there is no questions, thank you.